I'm Dave from Chase the Summit. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Hoka Torrent 2. The Hoka Torrent 2 is a low-drop trail racer designed for a variety of terrain, and this shoe really surprised me. Let's briefly talk about my history of shoes for a second here. I'm not like a pro shoe tester. If you've watched my channel, you probably know this. I focus on like fitness tech, GPS watches, all of those things, but I do like shoes, and that's why I'm talking about one today. The thing is, for about 5 years now, I've been wearing the same brand of shoes, and that was Altra. This is my pair of Altra Lone Peak 5.0s. I still love this shoe for trail running, but overall, over like the past 5 years, I've had some issues with durability with some of their shoes. Not the 5.0s in particular, but the 4.0s and the 4.5s, they kind of fell apart on me a little bit too early. And while I'm still going to continue to wear the Altra Lone Peak 5.0s as my main, trail running shoe, mountain running shoe, I did want to test the waters with some other brands to see what else is on the market. And the good news is that's about when Hoka emailed me and asked me if I wanted to test out the Hoka Torrent 2. Of course, I said yes. And as a full disclaimer, Hoka did send me these shoes for the purpose of testing for this video. I did not pay for these shoes. However, this is not a sponsored video. They didn't pay me to make this video. They don't get to see this video before you, so I'm allowed to give you my honest and unbiased opinion, and that's what I intend to do here. So like I said, I'm not a pro shoe tester. I don't have a ton of experience with a bunch of other shoes, but I do have a lot of experience with the Altra Lone Peak 5.0s, and that's kind of what I want to compare them to. Even though I know these two are designed for different purposes, I still think they can actually compete against each other pretty favorably, and I was kind of surprised by that. So I've been wearing the Hoka Torrent 2 for about 3 weeks now, and I have put these things through their paces. They have been on buffed out trails, they've been on like up and down technical terrain, they've been through mud in wet areas, running in the rain on trails. And just this past week, I took them to the mountains and I did 4,000 feet of elevation gain in an 8-mile loop and really put these things to the test in terms of traction, durability, all of that stuff. So I feel like I have a pretty well-rounded opinion to share my opinion with you and what I think about them so far. And spoiler, I like them a lot, so you could probably skip to the end of this video, but don't. I have a lot to say here. Before we dive in though, if you find this video useful, helpful, educational, funny, I don't know, anything, consider hitting that thumbs up button down below and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out, helps my channel grow, makes me happy, all of those things. When it comes to sizing and fit of the Torrent 2, I was pleasantly surprised. I bought a size men's 10.5, which is the same as my Altra Lone Peak 5.0s, and they fit really well. I have no issues with the length of the shoe, and even the width, surprisingly, is pretty good. Something you might not know is I have clown feet, and my midfoot is actually really wide. This part of my foot gets really wide, while the forefoot and heel are kind of narrow on my feet. So I always run into an issue where I get a hot spot right on the instep here, and it starts to get sore right around the archway of my foot. Surprisingly, that's not the case with the Hoka Torrent 2. I've tried other Hoka shoes on that have felt really tight. These Torrent 2s feel a little bit wider than the rest. I don't know if that's just my experience or if everyone feels that way. This shoe is a neutral trail running shoe, and Hoka calls it a racing shoe, so they designed this to be fast and light. Hoka calls this a low cushion and responsive shoe. However, I have some disagreements with that. We'll talk about that later on in this video. One surprising thing to me, coming from Altra as a platform as a whole, is that Altra has been a zero drop shoe forever. All of their shoes are zero drop, whereas the Torrent 2 is a 5mm drop. All that means is that the forefoot is slightly lower than the heel by 5mm, and honestly, this wasn't a big deal to me. A lot of people told me that if you're transitioning from Altra to another brand, or you're going from another brand to Altra, you really need to transition slowly and do all these things. Honestly, I just put these things on my feet and started running, and I had zero issues. Of course, your mileage may vary, but honestly, that 5mm drop is really hard to notice. It's a very low drop. Another interesting fact about the Torrent 2 is that the forefoot of the shoe has only 18mm of cushioned midsole material, whereas the back of the shoe has 23mm of midsole material. And what's interesting about this is that they actually use their ProFly technology. I think that's what it's called. Basically, the forefoot of the shoe actually has a more stiff, more responsive midsole foam, whereas the rear of the shoe is a lot more cushioned. The purpose of this stiffer forefoot and softer heel is that when you're running, and even on flat terrain, all of that energy transfer is going through the front of the forefoot. And of course, when you're climbing uphill, the same thing happens. All of that energy transfer is going through the front here, and you don't want the foam to compress and you lose all of that energy that your body's putting out. On the flip side of that, if you're running downhill and you're landing on your heel or you're landing on the back of the foot, that's where you want the cushion, because you want to take up that shock absorption on the downhill sections of the trail. And in practice, this actually works really well. I was surprised by this. When I'm running, I'm climbing, the shoe feels very responsive and fast. And when I'm descending or there's like a staircase going downhill, the shoe feels really soft and plush. I really like what they did here. I thought it was kind of a marketing gimmick with that ProFly midsole, but you can actually feel it when you're running with the shoe. The upper material on the Torrent 2 is an engineered mesh, and it is quite thin. However, it does have quite a bit of welded overlays on the outside here that go quite a ways up the side of the shoe, and that does reduce the breathability significantly. However, I didn't find this to be a really hot shoe overall, even when I was running with it on a pretty hot 90+ degree day. I did notice on a couple of occasions when I dunked my foot in a river when I was crossing, rock hopping across a river, that it didn't dry out super fast. It took a little bit of time to actually fully dry out. So that's something to consider if you run in really wet areas. Around the heel of the shoe, the welded overlay actually raises up a little bit, and there are some vents in there to allow for water to get out. So it does have some areas to drain if it needs to, but it's not a super, it doesn't dry out super fast. Overall though, the upper material is quite soft and comfortable, and when you tighten down the laces, it feels like a sock. It's a very fitting shoe. I have no complaints about the upper material overall. Something I found really impressive about the Hoka One Torrent 2 is actually the weight of the shoe itself. On my scale, with my size 10.5 men's Torrent 2, comes in at 9.95 ounces, just shy of 10 ounces. And as a comparison, my Ultra Lone Peak 5.0s here come in at 11.3 ounces, so they are significantly heavier, and you definitely feel that on your feet when you're running. Flipping the shoe over, we get a look at the multi-directional lug pattern here. This was a surprisingly aggressive lug pattern. I really didn't expect this for something that they considered, a fast and light kind of do-it-all trail running shoe. The lug material itself is made of a sticky rubber, which is really good on dry rock. It will really grip on to any little feature on a dry surface. However, when things get wet, it does lose its traction, but it's actually still pretty good even in wet conditions. One area where it did suffer though is when it was, rock that was totally bone dry with a slight dusting of sand over it. That's when this outsole actually slid a little bit, but really I don't think any outsole is designed for that sort of thing. When it comes to the ride of the Torrent 2s, I've been really happy so far. There's something about them. They feel fast, but they also feel like there's just enough cushion to get you by. They don't, cause my joints to hurt or my feet to hurt. Overall, a really pleasant ride, very comfortable, and it feels fast. I don't know why. That's the only way I can word it. When it comes to running on really technical terrain though, I have found that there's a lack of protection between the outsole, the midsole, and the inside of the shoe, where sharp rocks can penetrate through the midsole, and you can feel it dig into the bottom of your foot pretty painfully if you land on a really sharp rock. I think that may be because there isn't a rock plate in the shoe, or maybe there's a very thin one, so rocks can protrude into the shoe, but it's not a huge concern if you're not like on crazy aggressive trails. When it comes to looks and fashion with the Torrent 2, I know that's not at the top of everyone's priorities, but it does count when you're getting that race photo, right? I do like the look of these shoes, even in this blue and orange colorway. It does match a lot of my trail running clothing, so that's a bonus. In the marbled outsole, between the aqua and orange color is actually really cool looking as well. Now let's talk about durability. I've put these things through the ringer so far. I don't know how many miles I have on them, but I've got a lot of hard miles on them over the past month. And the only area where I show a little bit of concern would be on the outsole. If you look closely at the outsole, you can see like here, if I can peel it up with my finger, there's a bit of a flap. The outsole is actually peeled away from the midsole a little bit there, and that's occurred in a couple of areas on the outsole. Even up here, there's a bit of a gouge on the outsole and the lugs, and then throughout the whole outsole, you can see that parts of the lugs are just missing entirely. Other than little areas of the outsole, overall, they've held up really well, and they're not even staining or anything. They look pretty clean despite being put through mud puddles and through a couple of rivers. Overall durability is looking pretty good on these. And finally, let's talk about the price of the Torrent 2. These come in at $120. Which is actually a really good price, I think, for what you're getting with this shoe. This is a very versatile shoe. Despite being labeled as kind of a lightweight, responsive racer, I found it to have enough cushion for long days in the mountains. Even hiking was pretty comfortable in them. And because of that softer heel and firmer forefoot, going downhill is pretty comfortable as well. The traction of the outsole on this thing is super aggressive, and I was really happy with how it climbed and descended, how it reacted in wet conditions and really muddy conditions. Overall, just a really versatile outsole a versatile shoe overall. Even when I had to run on roads between sections of trails while I was running last week, I had no issues of how these felt on the pavement, despite having really big lugs underneath. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of these Torrent 2 so far. I'm gonna continue to test them, and if there's any surprises, I will report back to you with a longer term review. But in this last month, I've been having a ton of fun in these Torrent 2s. I know I'm kind of late to the party on the Torrent 2, and they've been around for about a year now, but I still wanted to share my opinion with you because I really like them. And I want to hear from you. If you're wearing the Hoka Torrent 2s, tell me what you think about them down in the comments below. And if you don't have them and you're interested in them, tell me why. Let me know in the comments down below as well. And if you think I'm crazy for running in Hokas and Altras at the same time, who am I? What am I doing? Let me know about that in the comments below too. And of course, if you enjoyed this video about these awesome shoes, I would really like it if you hit that thumbs up button down below and consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss more videos about shoes and other things in the future. Also, if you're planning on picking up a pair of Torrent 2s, I will have links in the description that do help support my channel, but of course, they cost nothing extra to you. Okay, with that, I'm done now. I'll see you next time.